Welcome to another episode of Q&AI podcast. Today we're joined by Piyanka Jain. She is the CEO and co-founder of Askanola. And today we're here to talk to her about her new adventure and about agentic AI. So welcome, Piyanka. Maybe we'll start with a little bit of your background and let the audience get to know you.
Great. Thank you for having me here, Bob. Excited to share my perspective and also my background. So I was born in India. I did my bachelor's of engineering in India, and I came to US for my PhD. And instead, I ended up doing two masters, both in engineering, computer engineering, and environmental engineering. But my work was always applied statistics, mathematics, and algorithm. That was of interest for me. I built my first AI model in 2002, and then since then, been working in this space. Very interested in data decisions, worked in companies like Adobe and PayPal, and then started my consulting company, Airing, where we did data literacy for large enterprise clients, think Google, Comcast, James Smuckers, and also did data consulting for mid-cap, high-growth companies, think less than 2,000 people in fintech, consumer apps, SaaS, and others. And then recently, 2 months ago, launched Askanola.ai, and here we are.
Hey, so you've been a consultant for what, 15, how many years now doing consulting?
Yeah, long time, long time. Yes, 15
Okay.
years. Yeah.
And it sounds like you've been helping. What part of the customer or part of the business you've been helping? It's been mostly with the procurement side, finance side. What part? I'm just curious. What part of the businesses you've been helping with them understand their data?
Yeah, so for the consulting side, we've been working, when we work with mid-cap, high-growth companies, typically we would engage with the CEO and C-suite, and we would basically look to understand what, for a 2,000 people company or a 1,500 people size company, what are the most important AI or data use cases they should be looking at, and that's usually across everything, product, marketing, operations, and so on, and then find the biggest top use cases. And that could be, listen, we first of all, we need a data engineering foundation. We need all of our data coming into one place. We have a framework for single source of truth. So that could be their top requirement and priority, because they don't even have foundations to make data driven decisions. They don't have a single source of truth. So it may start from there, or it may have that as the component, or it could be like, for example, for 7-Eleven, the ATMs in 7-Eleven, the big problem was we have a very high residual rate in our ATMs. In that case, we are building a very, very specific model. It's a giant machine learning AI model with an optimizer on top, which predicts how much cash to load in each of those ATM machines to have the optimal residual rate, so that you don't load too much cash, or you don't run out of cash. So we've been pretty wide. We are behind fraud model of BBVA. We've been pretty wide in our application.
Okay, so yeah, because when I look at most businesses, it seems like I go to engineering, the source of truth is Jira, Confluence. If I go to sales, the source of truth is Salesforce.
Salesforce.
And if I
Yep.
go to the operations team, they're usually SAP or Oracle.
Yeah.
So there's multiple sources of truth. So you're tapping into all these and trying to are you going across engineering, marketing, and
Yeah.
sales to try to make sense of a business?
Yeah. I mean, for the mid cap, so for mid cap, high growth companies, think less than 2,000 people, their customer experience is their product. And it really doesn't matter whether that part of that intelligence of how your customer interacted with your product sits in Salesforce, it sits in your ERP because the real billing is coming from SAP. It sits in potentially Amplitude because your data of how the product was used is sitting in another tool. We bring in all of that data to a single source of truth, obviously through ETL, ELT, data pipelining. And then we can build intelligence on top of it, whether it's insights, whether it is databases, whether it is models, or operationalized models.
And, and so now I'm curious, so you've been doing this for 15 some years. What made you decide starting, doing a product company or doing a startup is a good thought? I mean, that's always a risky thing.
Yeah,
You jumped off the
it's a
cliff.
very risky. It's a very risky thing, especially when you invest in your own startup. So, which is what I did. starting with my investment and my time. So what I've been noticing, Bob, in all these years of working with these mid-cap high growth companies is that the decision maker needs to make a decision. For example, a head of product is wanting to figure out what is happening, what are the key components of habituation as people come into our product. What do they need to do, which shows me they have habituated, and how does that impact future spend? Now, that's a pretty important insight for this leader to make some decisions on what things I should show them right as when they come in. What should I expose to them? What kind of emails should we send? What kind of in product prompts we should do? But what happens is usually they need insights today, and then they ask an analyst, sometimes their internal team, sometimes analytics consultants like us. It takes 3 to 4 to 5 weeks to get an insight. By that time, I mean, these are high growth companies. They're moving really fast. They had to make decision already. Yeah. So they make the decision and the data comes in too late. This is what I was observing over and over and over again. What we did with Askanola is we reduced that 5-6 weeks of time to minutes so that this head of product can ask this question now, or has a question now, can ask Enola right now and get this insights today and make decisions today.
Yeah. But why now? I mean, that's been a pain point for
a long time
now. So what changed?
What changed? Yeah. I mean, the LLM, the 2017 paper that you probably have read as well, which changed how LLMs, large language models have existed for a really long time, but the ability to almost simulate human-like thinking by just predicting the next word, by doing the randomized probabilities, that just showed up right now. So in 2020, I would say, is when the real capabilities, when Google and OpenAI and others came out with these models that could really do something with a human-like interaction. So that's one thing which happened. GPUs and CPUs happened, compute power. I mean, I shared with you, I built my first AI model in 2002. What did it look like? It looked like me running one simulation for submitted at night, 6 p.m., distributed across 20 Unix clusters, and come back next morning and hope to get one answer. Then put that into my eigen matrix, calculate it for 100 such runs, and then I have a loss function, right? From there, 23 years ago to now, it's a click of the button. It's so super fast because we have compute and we have these new LLM capabilities which didn't exist before.
Yes. So now I always tell people, agentic AI is basically a new nonlinear, non-deterministic programming language. So this agentic AI is basically spawning a whole new series of startups like yourself. Now, I'm curious, do you see agentic AI as kind of a new emerging technology, enabling new things, or do you feel like you're disrupting an existing market? Because you're kind of putting yourself out of business, right? You're basically trying to automate the consulting role.
Yeah.
Or do you feel like you're disrupting big players? Are there big players out there that are going to get disrupted because of this new technology?
I think, Bob, disruption is very evident. If you look around the market, October unemployment rates, September unemployment, disruption is at large. AI or Gen AI is disrupting the business. I mean, obviously other political conditions are also disrupting the business, but like Gen AI is creating a massive disruption in the business, the way we thought about it. So it is basically saying you have spent for a particular task, you have been spending 200 hours. Now you can do it in 2 minutes. That's a huge acceleration. It's like basically saying from your, horse-driven carriage, you went to automobile. And now what would take you to get from Albuquerque to Santa Fe, I don't know, however long it will take you in a horse carriage, now you can get to it in an hour. And then you add airplanes. And now you can get from, instead of taking the ship, I mean, ships were amazing when there is like Titanic or whatever, large ships, that would take you, I don't know, weeks to get from Asia to US. Now you can do that in 6 hours or 9 hours. That's the disruption.
So who do you think you're disrupting? If I think of you, are you disrupting the large consulting firms out there? Or are there actually other
Oh,
players that are actually offering similar products now? Or do you see a whole new raft of new players coming into the decision-making space?
yeah, yeah. So I think specifically, so we talked about general Gen AI, and now you're specifically saying for Askanola, who are we disrupting? I think what Askanola is disrupting, it's actually creating a new category as well. And I'll talk about central decisioning system, which we haven't talked about before, where the world is going. But before that, I think what we are disrupting is the way of, I think we're disrupting dashboards and old ways of thinking in
Gotcha.
analytics. That's what we are disrupting. Why would you need dashboards which take 4 weeks to build when you in on Askanola you can actually ask question and say, what was my CAC last week? What is it? How's my CAC trending? What's my CAC to LTV ratio? And then click those charts and say, put it in the
Oh,
dashboard in minutes. Why would you not do that versus in the old way of building dashboard? And why would you not ask Enola, what's happening with why is my CAC cost of acquisition, cost of acquisition cost, that's CAC. Why is my CAC increasing? Which sources are contributing to increasing CAC?
okay.
Why won't you ask Enola and get answer today and do something about it versus wait 4 weeks, 5 weeks for an analyst to give you an answer? So I think that's we are disrupting hundreds of hours, which are going in and making into minutes. So I would say dashboard and the old analytics process. Analysts are using the Askinola as well. They love the product, right? So, I think analysts are going to use the product to make themselves faster. The end user is going to use
Yeah.
the product to make themselves empowered, right?
Yeah.
Empowering end users.
Yeah, because this kind of sounds like you're disrupting the Looker, Tableau, the SQL market. Having to build reports from scratch or being SQL. Some almost like you're democratizing data. You're starting to make data available to the actual end user now. You're
Right,
cutting out the middle
exactly.
in this game.
Yeah, and also because Enola does automatic semantic layer creation, which means you connect her to the database, she automatically creates facts and dimensions versus other systems, which you and I have probably built for many, many times, where you have to really manually say, this is revenue is coming from this table dot this column, and subscription will come from this, right? Promotion is coming from this. Instead of doing it physically, manually, Enola does this automatically says, here's what I've understood based on reading your tables, views, and schematics and your SQL. Do you want to change it? It's a completely different way. It's automatic.
Yeah. Now, the other thing I'd be interesting, for us if we're doing software development, usually we write some software, we build a unit test, and give it to QA to make sure it works right. With this
Yeah.
new agentic AI programming, it's kind of non-deterministic, right? We're using these large language models to help reason and automate things in new and different ways.
Yeah.
Any words of wisdom to other agentic AI startups out there in terms of, how do you QA something like this? It's not
Yeah,
deterministic.
yeah, because yeah, as you said, Bob, it's probabilistic, and probability means there is false positive and false negative, which means it's going to give you misinformation. So if and that's the problem with current LLM, because people ask us all the time, why would I do it in Ask Enola when I can just ask Chat GPT, or I can use a Genie on Tableau, or Mobi on Triple Whale, or whatever those conversational AI wrapper, LLM wrapper on our application is. The problem with just using LLM wrapped application is that it's full of hallucination. And even if I were to say, hey, this system will hallucinate 5% of time, as an end user, you don't know which 5%. If I have to make a decision today and I have data in front of me, which of that is wrong? You don't know. That means you'll never feel confident on your making decisions. So as far as data-driven decisioning is concerned, you need high fidelity. You need 100% trust on that system, which means you can't quite use generalized solutions. You need contextual and you need accuracy, if
Okay.
that kind of
Okay.
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so are you
Uh,
benchmarking? Are you creating benchmarks for your solution, or are you actually leveraging domain experts to score the answers?
Yeah, so yeah, and your question, I didn't fully answer the question. Your question is how do you get around hallucination? So, um, what we have done, Askanola is not built as a LLM wrapper. Askanola broke down what an analyst does, let's say into 200 parts, and automated all of those 200 subparts, some of them using LLM, some of them using Python code, some of them using something else. And then each of those subparts, we build a validation loop around it. So each of those parts get done one way, then another way to validate it. So that, and then each step
I
continues to
got
be
you.
validated. So there is no hallucination. And then on top of that, we have guardrails. We put guardrails that your solution needs to fall within this. If it's not falling, even after validation, it goes back. So that's the way to do. If you're doing an agentic solution, you need to build systems to address hallucination, which means in our case, we are saying we know analytics better than an LLM would know because we've been doing it for years. And so we have a recipe when, for example, if a question gets asked, hey, what's my CAC trend over last weeks? This is an aggregate analysis. In our world, we know what the recipe for aggregate analysis is. And so Enola is instructed, do step one this, step two this, step three
Gotcha. Okay.
this.
Okay. So you're putting your guardrails. You're putting some you've got your own proprietary guardrails on this from all your years of experience.
And framework. A framework is called Bader. Bader is discussed in my book, Behind Every Good Decision. It's used by thousands of people in various enterprises, with which we trained people when we did large scale data literacy projects. We have Enola is powered by Bader. And that's why she can pretty much, you can parachute Enola in procurement, you can parachute Enola in retail pharmaceutical sale, you can parachute her in uh, B2B sales and say, hey, why is my win? I want to improve my win rate. And she's able to answer questions in context because she's also building that intelligence with you. When you ask her a deep question, she asks you a question back
Gotcha.
and systematically builds a problem statement, not even solution, problem statement with you. When she and you both agree on that, this is my problem statement, these are my hypotheses, whatever else, that's when she executes.
Okay. Now you mentioned the book. So I know you wrote a book on decision making back in 2014. Any
Yes.
What are the one or two things that 2025, 10 years later, agentic AI is on the scene now? Anything you would change in the book?
I have chapters to add in the book. The book is all the chapters. I mean, I'm still getting royalties, so people are still reading the book. Thankfully, thank you for that. But I don't want to change any chapter, but I want to add chapters on agentic AI and really how to build systems well. I would also like to, because the book was really written for end users, like a head of product, a product manager. I wanted to demystify analytics for them. I want to demystify agentic AI and LLMs for people. So there would be one chapter if I could edit my book, which I'm yet not getting permission from my publisher. Maybe they'll hear this podcast and they will give me permission. One chapter will be just demystifying LLMs. What is a large language model? And then another chapter on just the use case and identifying how can a company today, any company which is incumbent, how do they figure out the biggest use cases for themselves? Because right now, every individual UI, everybody is getting bombarded by agentic AI providers, kind of like myself, and people and saying, promising you the moon and the stars. And how do you figure out which solution to even look at? That's one thing which is fairly needed. I think there's a huge burden in the on people and people's LinkedIn inbox and email inbox where they're getting pestered and sold AI and agentic solution. Um, and 1 out of 100 of them is actually a good solution. You need them.
Yeah.
How do you figure out that 1 out of 100? Now,
Well,
I would want to write a chapter on that.
yeah, and that's probably a good question around privacy and security when you're using these large language models. Which one are you actually, or how do you deal with you're dealing with sensitive company data usually here, right? You know,
Yeah.
is this data, or customers letting their data outside their data centers to ChatGPT, or are you having to bring the large language model to the data?
Yeah, so the way we are working is our model sits on Azure Foundry right now, and we have an encrypted pipe going into as a read access to the user's database, and all the computation, all the data stays in the user system. What we bring back from the user system into Enola database, which is also encrypted, the pipes are encrypted, the database is encrypted. What we bring back is the semantic understanding. That's number one, which is fact and dimension. What is what? That's just a mapping. Think of it as a mapping, fact and dimension schematic. So that's one knowledge which sits in Enola database. The other thing that sits in Enola database is tables and charts, whatever we have produced, dashboards, outputs, whatever you see on askanola.ai, that sits on, so you can see revenue, weekly CAC, whatever, that's sitting in, but it's sitting encrypted. But yes, and it's all using SOC2 of Azure. So we are inheriting Azure's SOC2 certificates and Rails. But yes, there is an exposure of some kind, but it's no different than Snowflake. It's no different than Tableau. It's no different than any other system which has access to your data.
No. Well, Piyanka, I have a soft spot for entrepreneurs in general because I know how scary it is to jump off these cliffs and do something new like this. Any words of wisdom for anyone else trying to jump off the agentic AI cliff? Because I think there's a whole raft of startups out there using agentic AI to solve problems in new and different ways. Any words of wisdom for them?
Yeah, and it's a word of wisdom I want to give myself as well, is that to really go and validate the use case first with your end users. You have a huge network. Everybody has a huge network. Go and talk to people, and let's say you came up with a hypothesis that this is a problem that you want to solve. Go and validate it with the people. Get the willingness to try and buy your product before you build it, because building right now is easy, but the truth is 95% of proof of concepts are not AI proof of concepts are not making it to production, which means the systems are not robust, they're not doing what they're supposed to do or what they claim to do, and so on. So there's a lot of noise there. And if you actually go find a tiny use case and just solve it to the finished line. Like last mile problem, which we have talked about supply chain, last mile is a big problem. In the agentic world, to solve and give solution in context is a big problem, because the general LLMs are great at generalized, but in context, specific to a problem is a hard problem to solve. If you're able to solve it in whatever use case, you have a business to go and develop and raise funds and so on.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I mean, I always tell people, make sure you understand your customers. Make sure you have 3 customers that are willing to take reference calls when you start a new venture. Well, Piyanka, I want to thank you. This has been amazing. Good luck on Askanola, and thank you for joining us. And thank you for the audience, and look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Q&AI.
Thank you for having me here.